later, not as evidence but as a kind of key. Everyone wanted her to remain the one who listened. He thinks of what it does to a person to carry that role for too long, to become the place where others set down their troubles without offering to carry any in return. When he tries to reach Evan Kell, the neighbor-turned-friend whose statement has resurfaced, he is met first with quiet resistance. Numbers have changed, addresses shifted. Eventually, he finds an email address listed under an old, inactive website. He sends a message that is more human than official, emphasizing his wish simply to talk, not to accuse or demand. Days pass without reply. Jonah feels the familiar pull toward impatience, the urge to push harder. Instead, he waits, remembering that those who live with long-held uncertainty often need time before they can risk speaking it aloud. In the meantime, he revisits the shoreline of the lake, not with measuring tools, but with the slower pace of someone trying to feel what it is like to choose this place on a difficult night. He walks the path from Hana's old street to the water, counting the breaths it takes, noticing the way the air cools as trees gather overhead. He imagines her steps, the possible presence of another person beside her, the unspoken conversation that might have unfolded, or the silence that might have persisted. He thinks about guilt, not as a label, but as a quiet companion people carry for years. The friend who did not ask one more question, the neighbor who did not step outside, the family member who dismissed a passing comment as mood instead of plea. Even himself, the young officer who accepted an uncertain conclusion because he did not yet trust his intuition that something was missing. In his notebook, he does not draw diagrams, he writes phrases. Who felt responsible for her well-being? Who benefited from her silence? Who needed her to stay the same? Who might feel exposed if her inner world were fully known? He begins to see the case less as a single event at the lake and more as a pattern of small interactions that led there. Each conversation Hana had in the weeks before her final night, each choice she made to listen rather than speak, each moment when someone sensed something beneath her calm and decided, gently, to look away. When he finally receives a brief reply from Evan, just a few lines agreeing to meet, it feels less like progress and more like another door opening onto a deeper level of uncertainty. Because Jonah knows that what Evan carries is not likely to be a simple statement of facts. It will be a mixture of memory and remorse, partial observations tinted by the feeling of standing close to another person's quiet struggle and not fully recognizing it. As he prepares for that conversation, Jonah feels no triumph, only a deep, steady awareness that whatever truth emerges will not neatly resolve the questions that have haunted this case. It may instead expose the intricate ways in which care and avoidance, love and distance, can live side by side in the same heart. For now, he allows himself to accept that his work is not to fix the past, but to honor the complexity of the people who lived through it, including the young woman whose absence still shapes the air around that quiet Michigan lake. The quiet began to shift when Jonah started speaking with the people who once stood closest to Hana, those who had known her not through public moments, but through the private, uncertain spaces where small truths are often whispered or withheld. What he finds is not outward hostility or denial, but something far more fragile. People protecting versions of themselves they fear might dissolve if touched too directly. Her former roommate, Mara, greets Jonah with a hesitant smile that flickers as she opens the door. She remembers Hana vividly, yet every sentence she offers seems carefully chosen, as if certain memories might bruise upon contact. When Jonah asks about the months before that winter, Mara pauses often, her gaze drifting toward the hallway as though it might answer for her. There were times when she seemed tired, Mara finally says, then immediately lowers her eyes. Not defeated, just stretched thin. She stops again, biting lightly on her lip. I didn't ask enough. I think she liked it when no one pushed too hard. Jonah nods gently, letting the silence stand. It is not the tiredness itself that interests him, but the way Mara's shoulders rise and fall with each word, like someone carrying more than she wishes to admit. Another conversation brings him to Adam, a close friend of Hana. They meet in a quiet diner where the faint clatter of dishes masks the undercurrent of tension that settles between them. Adam speaks openly at first, but as soon as Jonah mentions the overlooked statement from Evan, Adam's posture changes. His fingers tighten around his cup. His words become slower, careful. She had many people who cared about her, Adam says, but she didn't always let us in. She had a world inside her that no one else could completely reach. Jonah tilts his head slightly. Did anyone try too hard to reach it? That depends, Adam replies after a long pause. Sometimes wanting to help can become its own kind of pressure. It is the way he says pressure, soft, almost afraid, that makes Jonah wonder what unspoken conflict lies beneath his calm expression. Something about the past seems to hold Adam in a delicate grip, though he offers no concrete detail that points toward wrongdoing or regret. Then there is Leela, someone Hana confided in occasionally. Their conversation unfolds slowly, with moments where Leela inhales as if preparing to confess something, only to exhale in a quiet retreat. I loved her, Leela admits gently. Not in the way people expect, but with the kind of affection that hopes to stay invisible because numbing it might disrupt the balance. Her eyes soften, but she drifted sometimes. She would lean closer, then farther away, like she couldn't decide how much space she needed. Jonah notices the way her voice trembles at certain words, how she glances at her hands as if searching for traces of something she once held too lightly. It becomes clear that Lila, too, carries her own version of uncertainty, one shaped not by guilt, but by longing without resolution. Each relationship, once warm and uncomplicated in memory, now seems threaded with small frictions and unresolved emotions. Not enough to suggest clear intent, but enough to reveal that Hana lived surrounded by people who saw her through different lenses, each believing they understood her, each perhaps missing what lay beneath her quiet. Jonah leaves every conversation with the same subtle ache, the realization that truth, in this case, is not hidden in deception, but in the gentle distortions of memory and affection. No one appears outwardly harmful. No one holds a confession. Yet each person shows signs of emotional strain when speaking of their final days with her. And in those fractures, small, human, painfully real, Jonah senses the shape of something uncertain and unfinished, as if Hana's life had always been suspended between the expectations of those who cared for her and the solitary pull of her inner world. He finds himself wondering whether the true danger in her story lies not in a single individual, but in the quiet pressures created by many hearts tugging at her in different directions. A truth forming not from malice, but from contradiction. 5. Old secrets unfold, revealing betrayal and hidden personal motives. When Jonah finally meets with Evan Kell, the neighbor whose forgotten statement stirred everything awake, he finds a man whose demeanor is both gentle and frayed, like someone who has practiced calmness for too many years. They sit in a living room softened by old furniture and dim afternoon light. Evan's hands tremble faintly as he pours tea, though he pretends not to notice. I didn't expect anyone to ask about her again, Evan says, settling into his chair. It feels like another lifetime. Jonah listens without interrupting, allowing the room's silence to ease them both into the conversation. Evan begins slowly, speaking of winter evenings when Hana would walk past his window on her way to the lake. Not every night, only when something seemed to weigh on her. He recalls brief exchanges, brief smiles, quiet pauses that hinted at an internal tension she never fully shared. She wasn't broken, he says, but she was carrying something she didn't know how to place. At first, his account aligns with what Jonah has already gathered. But then Evan hesitates, his eyes shifting toward a stack of unopened mail near the door, an accidental glance that tells Jonah there is something more fragile beneath the surface. "I didn't tell the full truth back then," Evan admits, barely above a whisper. "Not because I meant to hide anything, but because I wasn't sure what my part was, or wasn't." Jonah leans forward slightly, not pressing, simply giving space for the words to unfold. Evan breathes out slowly. "Hana told me a few nights before everything, that someone close to her had kept something from her. Something important. She didn't say who, she didn't say what, but she felt betrayed isn't the word. Disoriented maybe, like the ground underneath her had shifted." Jonah's breath steadies as he absorbs the new layer. The conversations he has already had echo back to him, Mara's hesitations, Adam's guarded tone, Leela's unspoken longing. Each held a subtle shadow, but none revealed the nature of what Hana might have discovered. "Did she say how it affected her?" Jonah asks softly. Evan closes his eyes for a long moment. When he opens them, the truth emerges with the slow, reluctant clarity of a memory one has avoided for years. "She said she felt unmoored," he murmurs, "like she didn't know where her loyalties belonged anymore, like she didn't know whose feelings she was supposed to protect." He pauses, letting the words linger in the quiet room. "She told me she wished someone would just be honest with her, completely honest. But she said it in a way that made me think she'd already given up on that possibility." Jonah senses that the secret Hana stumbled upon was not dramatic or incriminating. It was something emotional, something that touched her sense of connection, her understanding of the people around her. And it had unsettled her deeply enough that she walked into the cold searching for clarity or solace. Evan then reveals one final detail, spoken so softly Jonah has to lean in to hear it. "She said she wasn't sure whether the person who hurt her knew they had done it. That's what frightened her the most, that harm can come from love without anyone realizing." The words settle into Jonah's chest with slow, heavy resonance. Hidden motives, he thinks, are rarely rooted in ambition. More often, they spring from the quiet corners of affection, where people want too much or too little, and the imbalance leaves someone adrift. Hana had not been surrounded by villains. She had been surrounded by people she cared for, and whose unspoken desires and quiet omissions had led her to question her own footing. The secret she carried was not about betrayal in the obvious sense. It was the kind of betrayal that grows from silence, from words withheld out of fear or love or uncertainty. The kind that hurts more because no one meant it to. 6. Twist exposes the innocent as manipulative and morally corrupt. Jonah returns to his office after meeting Evan, carrying a vague outline of the emotional landscape surrounding Hana's final days. He sits at his desk, the folder before him, and begins to read through his notes not for facts, but for patterns, tones, hesitations, contradictions that reveal the emotional truth beneath the surface. It is then he notices something that had felt innocuous before, Adam's repeated insistence that he never pushed too hard. The phrasing returns with striking regularity, as if rehearsed. Coupled with Leela's admission of unspoken affection and Mara's guilt-laden pauses, Jonah begins to sense a subtle asymmetry in the emotional connections Hana navigated. He reaches out to Adam again, asking for a second conversation. Adam agrees, though his voice carries a thin thread of reluctance. They meet at a quiet park bench near the edge of town, where the trees sway gently in the late afternoon wind. Adam sits with his shoulders tight, his expression polite but strained. Something about him feels more practiced this time, less open, more arranged. "I've been thinking since we last spoke," Jonah begins, "about your friendship with Hana." Adam nods. "We were close, she trusted me." Jonah studies his face. "Did she trust you because you listened to her, or because she felt she needed to protect your feelings?" Adam's eyes narrow, not sharply, but subtly, like someone assessing the angle of a question before answering. "I never expected anything from her," he replies calmly. "I just wanted her to be happy." The words are clean, but the tone beneath them carries a faint, brittle edge. Jonah continues gently. "Evan told me she learned something that left her unsettled, something someone close to her kept hidden." At this, Adam's posture shifts, barely but undeniably. His hand tightens at his knee. His breath quickens for half a heartbeat. "She told me nothing about that," he says, but the air in his voice is thinner now. Jonah leans back slightly, letting his silence press more effectively than any direct accusation. Eventually, Adam exhales, the composure in his face cracking just enough to expose the flaw beneath. "She misunderstood something," he murmurs. "It wasn't what she thought." Jonah waits. "Leela told her I liked her," Adam admits. "She said it casually, like a joke. She shouldn't have. It wasn't true." He looks away, jaw tightening. "I may have been protective, but not in the way she assumed." Jonah senses a deeper layer. "Did you tell her that it wasn't true?" A long pause. "I told her it didn't matter," Adam murmurs. "That feelings change, that she needed to stop worrying about everyone else's expectations." Jonah hears what Adam does not say, that his reassurance had not been reassurance at all. It had been leverage, a way to keep her dependent on his approval, a way to maintain the role he valued, confidant, emotional anchor, unchallenged center of her small world. "She began to pull away after that," Adam admits, barely audible. "She said she needed space, that she felt watched, but I wasn't watching her. I just didn't want to lose her." His voice trembles, not with grief, but with the fear of losing control. And in that trembling, Jonah understands. Adam had not intended harm, but he had shaped Hana's world in quiet, manipulative ways, subtle emotional constraints disguised as concern. He had made himself indispensable, then resented her when she sought autonomy. He had held her in a soft, invisible grip, believing he was protecting her. When she tried to step back, something in him panicked. "I thought if she felt a little dependent," Adam whispers, "she'd stay." And suddenly, Hana's final nights take on a new shape, not defined by physical threat, but by emotional entanglement so delicate and complex that it left her unsteady, confused, uncertain of where she stood. The manipulation had not been overt. It had been woven into kindness, attentiveness, loyalty, the kind that looks harmless until viewed from the outside. The kind that quietly unravels someone who wants to make everyone else feel comfortable. Jonah feels a soft heaviness settle in his chest. Adam is not a monster, but he is not innocent either. He is a man who mistook control for care, who mistook affection for possession, who wrapped his insecurities in the fabric of gentle concern until the difference between love and constraint blurred. And in that blur, Hana lost her footing. 7 concludes with open-ended moral tone. Hiding truth saves someone. Jonah leaves the park long after the conversation has ended, long after Adam has walked away with the air of someone who cannot fully confront the reflection of himself he has just glimpsed. The sky has dimmed into evening, soft blue deepening into quiet gray. The shadows stretch across the path in long, delicate shapes. He walks toward the lake, not to reenact a moment, but to understand the emotional gravity that once drew Hana there. The air is cool, the water still. It is a place where thoughts unravel gently, where decisions feel suspended in a fragile balance. Standing near the shoreline, Jonah feels the weight of the case in a new form. He has no proof of wrongdoing in the traditional sense, no physical evidence connecting anyone to harm, but he holds a map of emotional forces that shaped Hana's final days, forces that cannot be measured or prosecuted. Evan's regret, Mara's avoidance, Leela's unspoken affection, Adam's quiet manipulations, Hana's kindness stretched between them. The truth is not a line, it is a circle, one in which every person played a small role, none aware of the full impact of their choices. Jonah knows the official outcome will be clean. No charges, no definitive conclusion. A respectful closing of a file that was opened again, only long enough to confirm what cannot be confirmed. But the real outcome lives outside paperwork. It lies in the questions that remain. Did Hana walk here alone to escape the delicate pressures of those who loved her unevenly? Did she come seeking clarity or comfort or stillness? Did someone follow not to harm her, but to plead for understanding? Did words pass between them that neither meant to wound? Did a moment of emotional imbalance shift her final steps toward the water? None of these questions have clear answers, and Jonah knows that speaking the emotional truth aloud might fracture lives that have already stretched thin under the weight of memory. Some truths, he thinks, do not bring healing. They bring only new forms of sorrow. When he returns to his office the next morning, he writes a final note for the case file. Not a conclusion, just a reflection. Some stories do not end with certainty. They end with the quiet understanding that love, in all its imperfect forms, can lead people toward places they never meant to go. He closes the folder, the soft click echoing through the empty room. Outside, the world continues its calm rhythm. People pass by unaware of the delicate threads that shape one another's lives. Jonah sits for a moment, letting the quiet settle. He has uncovered an emotional truth that cannot be written in any official report. A truth that, if spoken, might devastate a man already struggling to remain whole. And so he chooses silence, not to protect the guilty, but to preserve what remains of the living. The file is placed back into the cabinet, its weight unchanged, yet its meaning forever altered. As Jonah turns off the light and steps into the hallway, the final thought lingers, soft, unresolved, haunting. Sometimes justice is not what the world needs. Sometimes mercy lives in what we choose not to reveal. And somewhere in that quiet space between truth and restraint, Hana's memory continues, neither solved nor forgotten, but held gently in the uncertain hands of everyone she touched.